It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
To the program, we have Jan Morgan. Thanks for coming back on, Jan.
Hi, Paul. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fantastic this morning. The real question is, how are you? You're doing like 19-hour days now.
You know, we've been doing 19-hour days, Paul, for a long time, for months. But, hey, that's okay because it's kind of like getting back to the old days of campaigning before you had, TV advertising and social media marketing. It's actually getting out there, meeting the people, shaking their hands, listening to the issues they're concerned about, and then talking about your solutions. It's tough, but it's been very rewarding. And honestly, I would not take for the experience I've had over the past 8 months, traveling the state and meeting people.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much about different areas of our state and the specific issues that they're having that our government is not addressing, as well as I've learned a lot about our state business.
Yeah.
A lot I wish I hadn't found out, but, because it's almost overwhelming. You talk about a lot on your show, the corruption and the things going on, and it's even much, much, much deeper than we've even gotten into. So, I've been saying from the beginning, we are in a crisis moment in our state, and we're either going to turn the opposite direction, the people are going to take control, or we're going to continue down this path of excessive spending, excessive taxation, and corruption. That's the bottom line.
You guys are also, though, having fun on the campaign trail. I saw where, Reggie, who your Facebook Live videos, which do, obviously really well, he's always driving you. You always make sure to say, hey, I'm not doing a Facebook Live video while driving. But you guys have a good time because I know, he took a photo while, you were getting a little catnap, trying to, and that was fun because that got posted on social media. And I'm just like, these guys are out there. You guys are regular people. You're trying to make a difference, and you're having a good time while doing it. And I think that's just so refreshing.
Yes, it is, and I'm gonna miss that. We were talking the other day on the way home from somewhere, and we were laughing, and I said, "Gosh, we have spent so much time together, the four of us, and trying to get across this state every single day, really in a vehicle, 4 and 5, 6, 8 hours of driving a day, moving from one end of the state together." I said, "What? If we don't win this, when this is over, I'm going to miss you all." Mm-hmm. And they said, well, about once a month we can just get in the truck and drive across the state and talk to people.
That would be great. That would be great.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be great because, we want you to win, Jan. I mean, I think at this point you're the only one. I mean, you're speaking against the corruption. You're the obvious choice, and the fact that you're in this race has made Asa have to take all these conservative positions that he wouldn't have otherwise taken, and I think it's such a good a positive thing that in and of itself. But I want to talk about the prime. Go ahead. Well, hang on.
It's also
go ahead.
Well, it's also it's forced Asa to go places he's never gone.
Yeah.
For example, this weekend, just a couple of days ago, we were up in an area of the state. Let's think of where we were. It's hard to remember from one day to the next. We were up in Marshall, Arkansas, and then another little town that I think they've never seen the governor. And someone with the Republican Party that came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for coming here because you came here. The governor came here today to speak as well." And she said, the fact is, the very fact that he showed up in our little town where he's never even acknowledged our existence tells me that he knows he's in trouble.
Yeah. No, he is. I think at this point he is. Everything he's doing is kind of indicative of somebody who is very cautious about this election. Now, I want to talk to you about in 2016, Donald Trump. He won the primary here in the state of Arkansas. Ted Cruz came in second, Marco Rubio came in third. Now, in that primary, there were voters who came out who've never participated in the process before. And that, I believe, is why Ace is worried, because if those people, if we have another 2016 and those people who are now kind of on the radar because we know that they voted, if they come out and they vote anti-establishment like they did when they voted for Donald Trump, and for sure we can now say 100% Donald Trump was the anti-establishment candidate, it's going to be a very close race, Jan.
Yes, and these people are a little confused. we're having events across the state, Paul, that are not connected with the Republican Party. See, their way of doing things is just the Republican.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, it's 7 days to act, ladies and gentlemen. That's 7 days until the primary vote, Election Day on May 22nd. Early voting is underway. Welcome to the program. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. We want you to be a part of that. One of the ways you can do that is to call or text 870-275-9799. You can also go to facebook.com/Conduit News. Or search for Conduit News on YouTube, subscribe, and click the little bell to get the notifications. We're having very interesting stuff going on. I'll tell you, a lot of desperation out there. I'm not going to get in. Well, let me just say this. I know for a fact there appears to, the people that are contacting me, it appears that there is a lot of desperation among the Marble Palace crewmates, I would say. I've compared, the folks, if you ever see the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, and I believe it's the second one where you get a look at that ship where you're so old you eventually become part of the ship. Yeah, the Flying Dutchman. Yeah, and you're so old you eventually become part of the boat. And those types of people, except now apply this to the Marble Palace, they actually become these creatures that live in the walls of the Marble Palace. You know what I mean? And it is kind of it's in a weird way. In a weird way, it is kind of the maybe people operate under the assumption they have freedom, but in the way that place can just be very corrupting, tempting, and just oppressive. But anyway, look, they hate it when I describe it like that. They really do. They think that they're doing the most important work of their entire lives down there. What they don't realize is the folks back home are not in that bubble, and they're the weird ones. We're the normal ones, okay? So just remember that. You've got to have the right perspective if you go down there. You have to understand that everybody's going to be asking you to do the complete opposite of what you campaigned on, and you're going to have to be able to stand up to that. And there's not a lot of human beings that could do that. There's not a lot of in the human condition. If you run and you're the people's candidate, and then you go down into an environment where every person, every lobbyist, and every person you meet is asking you 10 times a day to betray the people that sent you down there. It's hard to stand up for anybody. It'd be hard to stand up to that. And there's a lot of people that go down there. They don't even realize it. I've arrived. I get to eat horizontally. And because it's a very Greek, and it's the Marble Palace. You feel like you're somebody. You walk in the door. Anyway, those types of people who are now like permanent residents, permanent relics inside the building that depend on it. They attend the court of King Asa. They are acting very desperate right now, and I'm not. I don't know how to read it. I'm not sure why. I'm just telling you they're acting desperate. That's what I'm saying. And we have 7 days to the primary. And there's a lot of stuff going on that's very, very weird and strange. And, you would certainly expect last-minute attacks and that sort of thing, especially since there was a lawsuit filed last week against Governor Asa Hutchinson alleging wrongful termination because an employee of the Poultry Commission didn't hire who Asa said to hire, allegedly, and then was fired because of that. Telephone number 870-275-9799. So that's the update there. We've got a good show for you. Coming up at 7:33, we'll be talking with State Representative Josh Miller. He had an op-ed that was published over at foxnews.com. We'll be covering that. So it's good for Josh Miller there, one of the most conservative legislators we have in the state. But let me tell you what everybody's talking about right now. You know what everybody's talking about right now at the Marble Palace? Dark money. Dark money. Ooh. This is what they're talking about. And it's quite humorous to me because they're the ones that get to define what dark money is, right? The Judicial Crisis Network, a Washington, D.C.-based group that is injecting a lot of cash into the Arkansas Supreme Court race that you'll be voting on Tuesday. And that's not a primary. That is it. The judges, or you vote on the judges on that primary date. And so everyone's freaking out about it. Oh, dark money. Can you believe they're spending so much money attacking Courtney Goodson? Oh, can you believe that they're doing this? And, of course, they're the ones that get to define what dark money is. They would say dark money is when Judicial Crisis Network injects this money, and that's dark money. We don't know where it's coming from. But it's not dark money, okay? It's not dark money if this big, company that has a lot of interest in seeing healthcare and seeing government's involvement in healthcare. It's not a big deal if that company were to say give to the, National Governors Association, and then the National Governors Association would then give all that money to an Arkansas candidate. That's fine. That's fine. That's not a big deal. That's not dark money. See, it's only dark money when it's going against what you want. Then it's dark money. And all these people now are clamoring, and they're calling people who, like the Judicial Crisis Network, which, hey, look, if they say something that is not true, you can challenge them on that. And that's what Courtney Goodson has done. I'm going to say more about that here in a minute. But you have people calling the Judicial Crisis Network cowards. I saw that quoted in the paper today. I also seen that on social media. You're cowards. And what they're saying is, and this is very dangerous. I want you to know how dangerous this is. They are clamoring for groups like the Judicial Crisis Network or any other group that is involved. They want you to disclose their donors. See, this drives them nuts. They are so mad that they can't see and they don't have a right to know who is contributing to these groups. And I'm telling you right now, if you think that's a good idea, you haven't thought it through. If you think it's a good idea for donors to not have the freedom to associate with whoever they want to associate with without having to disclose who they're associating with, then you are not for privacy. You're against privacy. And you're also for a system that would invite political reprisals. Because if you don't think the reason they want to know who the donors to these groups are so they can punish them politically or write laws that only affect them or try to, threaten to pull their licenses to do business, that's how they got the private option passed, by the way. There were always claims. Nobody would go on the record specifically, but you people know who it was, who said their family members' licenses and doing business were threatened if they didn't vote for the private option back in 2013. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as to what would happen if these totalitarian ideas were to come, into being reality, and you'd have people being forced to disclose their donors and associations. They would, number one, the donations might dry up because people would be afraid of the government coming after them. And that's wrong. One of the things Jan Morgan keeps saying, by the way, is the government should be afraid of the people. The people shouldn't be afraid of the government. She's exactly right. But anyway, let me tell you what the news. I wanted to preface that because everybody's freaking out again about this so-called dark money, and they're the ones that get to define what dark money is, right? And there's going to be a lot of people at your place of work today that have probably heard about Justice Courtney Goodson, who has now filed suit to block the TV ads that are running against her by this group, the Judicial Crisis Network. Faced with a blitz of negative 30-second television spots, John Moritz reports in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, leading up to next week's Arkansas Supreme Court election, incumbent Justice Courtney Goodson filed suit on Monday against several state TV stations in hopes that a judge would yank the ads off the air. Now, in Washington County, Circuit Judge Doug Martin, he did issue a temporary restraining order to halt the ads up in the northwest part of the state. That affected Nexstar Broadcasting. In Pulaski County, where the other suit was filed, that's, of course, the state's largest media market, you have Judge Chris Piazza scheduled a hearing for 10 a.m. on Friday. So there is no injunction there. They're going to have a hearing on Friday. That's getting close to the Tuesday election. You see what I'm saying? According to the Gazette, more than $533,000 worth of ads has already been purchased across Arkansas television markets by the Judicial Crisis Network, the conservative Washington, D.C.-based group that is criticizing both Goodson and one of her two opponents, Court of Appeals Judge Kenneth Hickson, according to filings from the Federal Communications Commission. Now, my question is this. Number one, if Courtney Goodson loses, will Asa Hutchinson do what he did last time and come out and say, I want the authority to appoint Supreme Court justices because the system is there's too much dark money. It's not fair. My candidate lost or whoever. Is he going to do it again? Because that's what he did. When Justice Courtney Goodson lost last time, she was trying to get a promotion. She was trying to become the Chief Justice. She lost that. Well, she was already a justice on the Supreme Court. Now she's trying to maintain her position, not get a promotion. Okay. Now, if she loses again, will we have to fight back yet again calls to give Asa Hutchinson more power, assuming he wins, which, again, the panic that's setting in is, I don't think that's an assumption you can make at this, but I'm just telling you, this is just my feeling. It's some weird stuff's going on. Will he come out, or will the Arkansas Bar Association or whoever else? You see, the reason why attorneys want Asa Hutchinson to appoint is because a lot of attorneys are Democrats. And if they have to run a statewide election and convince people to vote for them, people remember who they've supported in the past politically. So if you've supported Democrats or Democrat causes, or if you've, made your political views known at, the different soirees that happen across the state, and probably, get back to conservative-minded people that you're not really a conservative. And people say, well, they're nonpartisan. No. Come on. There are two ways to look at the law. You can look at it as evolving, and you can legislate from the bench, or you can look at it as is. And those are two political views at this point. Let's be very clear here. If you're an originalist and you interpret the Constitution under the originalist mindset, and you know that words have meaning, and you take the definition of those 18th century words and you apply them to today, you're an originalist. Okay? If you believe that somehow man can evolve and perfect himself, and that the words and the document is living and it changes as man evolves, then you are, number one, there's a lot of theological implications there that I would love to talk to you about, but you're a progressive liberal, okay? And those are two political positions on how to interpret our governing documents, okay? And so the idea was a nonpartisan judicial race. No, it's not. Because we've got judges that they're two schools of thought, and they're radically different. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. That's why I can't stand nonpartisan judicial elections personally. just because I think it's I just think it's intellectually dishonest. I know people want politics to not be in everyday life, but you have to realize everything that a government does is political, period. It just is. People throw this right. It's nonpartisan. Yeah, really? Is it? They throw it around because I guess that makes them feel good. It's like some sort of psychological, way to communicate that, oh, this is okay because it's nonpartisan. No, it's not. Just stop. Anyway. Do you ever hear anybody talk about the stuff that we talk about here on the program? From that perspective, I don't think you do. Anyway, here's my question. So the first question. Asa Hutchinson, if Courtney Goodson loses, will he come out again and try to centralize control in his power and appoint Supreme Court justices and take away your right to vote for Supreme Court justices? Because that's what he was advocating after Courtney Goodson lost the first time. The second question would be this. Why has it taken Courtney Goodson, why has it taken her, 2 years? Why has it taken her 2 years to finally file suit against the Judicial Crisis Network for allegedly making false accusations and false statements? She's suing for defamation. And aside from what I can tell, the attacks are the exact same that they were 2 years ago, aside from saying that she advocated for, raising her pay. And that's one that's specifically disputed. And if that's wrong, okay, if that's incorrect, then fine. The court's going to. But I mean, I actually keep this. I keep this flyer in my studio here. This is from 2 years ago. The Rich Insiders. This was a flyer mailer that was sent out by the Judicial Crisis Network 2 years ago. The Rich Insiders, Episode 1, Arkansas Supreme Court Justice Courtney Goodson. And on the back, we have things like most Arkansans don't get a free $50,000 vacation to Italy paid for by trial attorneys, but Supreme Court Justice Courtney Goodson did. Again, if that's not true, why are you just now challenging it? Why not challenge it after you lost? In large part, yeah, because of these ads. Look at this. I mean, and they've got the Washington Post cited here. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette is cited twice on this flyer here. We got to take a break. Joe's freaking out. We got to go. Back in a minute.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works, Obamacare, private option has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are two matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I'm going to read some of these Facebook comments based on our last segment. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the desperation attempts out there from just people who seem to be getting nervous that are connected, that financially benefit from the status quo at the Marble Palace. Gene writing, they're desperate because the House of Cards is about to fall on them. And now when we start talking about dark money, we're also talking about Courtney Goodson filing suit to stop political ads in Northwest Arkansas Court and Central Arkansas Court. Tim writes, ask Jake Files, John Woods, and others to define what dark money is. Gene writing, the House of Hutchinson controls the dark money. John Brumman and Max Brantley trust Asa Hutchinson to appoint Supreme Court justices. So we're asking the question here, folks, if Courtney Goodson loses again and they blame it on these ads, will Asa once again call for the appointment of Supreme Court justices and take away your right to choose your Supreme Court justices because you just can't possibly sift through what is true and what is not true? You can't possibly be trusted with that, just like you can't be trusted with a gun without a permission slip from Asa. You also can't be trusted to vote for a Supreme Court justice because you just are not elite enough. You don't understand law like these attorneys do that get a law degree and think that they're above everybody else. Gene also writes that Michael Lamoureux would be Asa's first choice for Chief Justice. Oh, gosh, the horror, the terror. And then this is probably the best one because we were talking about this word nonpartisan. People throw this word around, nonpartisan, like it's a get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, I get to do what I want to do because I'm calling it nonpartisan. And that makes you feel better, right? That makes you feel like I don't have an agenda. And so these Supreme Court justice races, these are nonpartisan races. Nonpartisan races. So it may make you feel good when you hear the word nonpartisan. Tim writes on Facebook.com/Conduit News, a Supreme Court justice files suit to stop opposition political ads. Put that in your nonpartisan pipe and smoke it. Exactly. But Paul, it's the Judicial Crisis Network. It's the Judicial Crisis Network. They're the ones that have made this partisan or political, really, by pointing out facts. Well, now they're being disputed. They're saying they're not facts, that it's defamation. By the way, a long time ago, Dana Carvey. You guys know Dana Carvey, the stand-up comedian, Saturday Night Live. He had a big special one time where he was talking about O.J. Simpson and they did a whole O.J. Trial bit, but one of the things he said was, he said you can't say the word judicial system without sounding intoxicated. And he would have this whole thing where he was like, you can't arrest me. No, it's not me. It's the judicial system. No, I didn't. It's the judicial system. That's the way I sound when I say Judicial Crisis Network. Okay, so we've got to go to break here. Sound off on Facebook. Let us know what you think, and give us a phone call or a text message. 870-275-9799. We have Kai writing, nonpartisan equals hidden agenda. Yeah, it's just better to be honest with people. If you know that something is partisan, you know where they're coming from. It's actually, it's more objective to know from what perspective what lens they're using to view of the events of the world. Back in a minute.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The Republican Party is king of where you put all of your ducks. You just go speak to the committees. You make sure you have the Republican Party, the establishment of the party, in your hands, and that's all you have to worry about. Well, my presence in this race, from the very beginning, the establishment side of the party has been cutting me out, and that's because Asa and his people pressured them to not let me speak. So we immediately, conservatives in areas all over the state, who aren't even active members of the Republican Party because they are sick and tired of the politics and the establishment positions on issues. So they started having their own events. Jan Morgan, just come to our city, we'll have a Jan Morgan for Governor event. And so his people were saying, well, who invited y'all here? Who's sponsoring those events? And we're saying, real people, just people.
Yep.
They don't know what to do about that. They don't know how to address that. They don't know what to do about a candidate who's not reliant on the establishment Republican Party acceptance to gain votes and to gain opportunities to speak. And now, the establishment of the party in many pockets has had to allow us to speak at their committee meetings. And they may sit there with their arms folded and grimaces on their faces, as I'm speaking, but they know I'm telling the truth.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually hadn't thought of that. What you're saying there is the fact that Asa tried to control the county committees and get you disinvited or put pressure to have you disinvited, that actually got your message out to more people because then they have their own events. I mean, that actually is,
right.
They're kind of the cause of their own demise in that case.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. And that makes people angry. The more they try to shut me out, the more angry the populace becomes. So it seems like almost everything that he and his people have done, their attacks on me, the personal attacks, the calling me Jezebel, the calling me a spirit, everything that they've done has actually backfired and helped me more than hurt me. And really, honestly, Paul, what else are they going to say about me? She's conservative. She's too conservative. I mean, what can they attack me on?
Yeah.
It's just not there.
And there was a bogus attack on you last week that went out on Twitter by a spouse of a government or ACE's employee, and it was disproven immediately. And really the only reason I want to bring this up, Jan, because I'd like to have you address it, but because it was the government that messed.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. My goodness. Does anyone get in a hurry when you're on a cell phone by any chance? Is that just me? I always get in such a hurry. Does anyone else feel like your blood pressure goes up when you check your email? Anybody? I think mine does. I have, and this is, I don't know if, you tell me if you're alone in this, but when I get like a bunch of text messages at once, I feel like I have to respond to them as fast as I possibly can. So then all my messages have like a ton of typos in them. Do you guys do that? Like my standard of communication with text is just so low because you get so many of them. You double and triple check your messages for typos, Joe. That's what you said? He says because he doesn't want to look like an idiot. Well, apparently, I don't value myself very much. But Yeah. Does anyone else do that? I get so frustrated, too. Like if you try to Google something, and I'm not very good at the keyboard either. So, all right. Let me see here. 870-275-9799. So, your Supreme Court justices, the ability to pick them with the vote. If Courtney Goodson loses, they will blame dark money again, and they will try to take away your Supreme Court justice, your right to vote for Supreme Court justices. Mark my words, they will try to do it. There'll be another push like there was last time. And Asa Hutchinson was for it. He was behind it. He wanted to pick. He wanted to expand the scope of his power and take away your authority because he is the attorney-in-chief. It's really, really sad. There's also some other news. Speaking of the Supreme Court, Arkansas Supreme Court yesterday said that states can now decide whether or not they want to have sports betting. Brooks Cabana, Arkansas entities unsure about gambling changes. So listen to this. Joe, we've got this article. Go throw this up there for our viewers, please. Arkansas politicians and college administrators are uncertain how they will respond to the United States Supreme Court decision Monday that enabled individual states to pass their own legislation on sports gambling. So this is not the Arkansas Supreme Court now. This is the United States Supreme Court. Okay? So states can now decide what they want to do when it comes to sports betting, meaning the Arkansas General Assembly, if they wanted to, could create policy to figure out how they would do this. Quote, historically, Arkansas has opposed any broad expansion of gambling, with the scholarship lottery being the one exception. I supported this more restrictive approach. Let's see, who is this that they're quoting? Arkansas already gambling, Southland, West Memphis, locations where people gamble, electronic games of skill, and Governor Asa Hutchinson said he was reviewing the courses. So this is a quote from Asa here. I have supported this more restrictive approach. Now we will need to review the Supreme Court decision and also track how the states react to this expansion of state flexibility under the 10th Amendment. We will be monitoring this closely. So then they reached out to some of the athletic directors across the state and got their opinions on this. Several of their athletic programs are regularly included in the bookings of legal sports gambling in Nevada is how they like to say it. University of Arkansas athletic director Hunter Urachek said, quote, he is still reviewing the potential ramifications of Monday's ruling. Arkansas State University athletic director Terry Mahajer said, quote, if the state of Arkansas proceeds with consideration once everyone is finished reviewing the court's decision, then at that time we would like to be part of the conversation moving forward to determine what is the best interest of the Arkansas State Athletics Department. Let's see what our friends over at Family Council have to say about this. They had a post almost immediately when the Supreme Court announced their ruling over at familycouncil.org. They write, on Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a federal law that had generally prevented states from legalizing gambling on sports. Family Council President Jerry Cox released a statement saying, any expansion of gambling is a bad thing. This court ruling sets the stage for states like Arkansas to become awash in the sea of gambling. Arkansas law already generally prohibits betting on ball games and other sports. We need to make sure that ban stays in place and applies to the racetracks at Hot Springs and West Memphis. Cox dismissed the idea that sports betting would be good for Arkansas's economy. In December, consultants for the state of Arkansas told our legislators that the state might be able to collect tax money from sports betting if the U.S. Supreme Court ever issued an opinion like this one. You can't gamble and tax your way to economic prosperity. Gambling preys on the poor. It's linked to an increase in domestic violence, homelessness, and divorce. Sports betting is going to appeal to younger people who are more likely to develop a gambling addiction. For every dollar the state would get in tax revenue from sports betting, it would have to spend a lot more on social services trying to clean up the mess that gambling makes in our communities." End quote. Cox said his group will oppose any expansion of gambling in Arkansas. Out-of-state groups, quote, "out-of-state groups are trying to open casinos in Pine Bluff, Texarkana, and elsewhere. Now, I expect we'll see groups wanting to legalize sports betting in Arkansas, too. Between the state lottery and the casino games in Hot Springs and West Memphis, Arkansas already has enough problems with gambling. We don't need any more." Again, Family Council's press release, their conservative educational and research organization based in Little Rock. Yeah, it is interesting. When you see people, the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery. Let's just take that for example. Isn't that the most recent expansion? It's certainly the biggest one. How did they get it passed? Well, it's for the kids. It's for the kids. How? Yeah. Well, we might as well have that scholarship lottery for the children. I mean, that is because they need scholarships. They deserve it. They really, really do. Look. I've seen, and everybody's heard stories, but it's a reality at a gas station, right? And I've told this on the air before. Somebody's needing, lottery tickets. They're at the gas station, and you see a father and his son, like a young son. He's like, buys $200 worth of lottery tickets, and his son wants a candy bar, and he says, "No, well, we can't afford it." Well, you see what I'm saying? To pretend that does not happen is naive. I mean, the question is, if you look at gambling, and if you decide that state-sponsored gambling, okay, now that's important, but that's what the scholarship lottery is. It's state-sponsored gambling. There's supposed to be welfare programs, right, are supposed to help. The government puts down they put out programs that are allegedly supposed to help people, and that's a debate as to whether or not it enables poverty or generational dependency. Obviously, in many cases, it does. But the idea of a state-sponsored program, it's for the kids. The idea of a state-sponsored program, though, that actually, if gambling has got a negative social impact, the idea that our tax dollars are going to support such a thing, that our government's mission is changed and it's actually doing things that are harming people, is, it's not a good thing, I guess. The phone number, 870-275-9799. I mean, tell me what you think. I mean, I know a lot of people out there have different opinions on the gambling issue, right? I think the scholarship lottery is kind of a joke. I mean, we've interviewed, the regulations that they do not follow, that they're supposed to follow. We've interviewed David Colbert on the program before, and he has been fighting this lottery nonsense for a long, long time. And just gambling in general. He's anti-gambling here in Arkansas because he's got some statistics on how it's like the number one fastest growing addiction in the country, that sort of thing. All right, so let's move on here. I want to talk a little bit about this article because we're going to be interviewing State Representative Josh Miller coming up at 7:33. Josh Miller. With an op-ed on Fox News. Joe, do you see this one? I can't remember if I pulled this one up for you. I know I have it for me. You've got it? Well, Google for me. I'm sorry, I should have given you this. Obamacare Medicaid expansion hurts people with disabilities. And it's a Fox News article. It's by Arkansas's own, from District 66, Josh Miller, who's going to be on at 7:33. And he writes this: nearly 8 years after President Obama signed Obamacare into law, its effects are still impacting Americans in terrible ways. Some of this could not have been avoided by legislators, but much of the pain is self-inflicted. In a landmark Supreme Court decision, states were given two options. They could expand Obamacare to more able-bodied adults, or they could instead refuse to implement the program and keep government smaller. My home state of Arkansas, Josh Miller writes on FoxNews.com, made the wrong choice. In 2013, the Arkansas General Assembly passed and Democrat Governor Mike Beebe signed into law Obamacare expansion in the state. Arkansas's so-called private option expansion plan at one point placed more than 330,000 able-bodied adults on welfare, costing taxpayers 79% more than promised so far. No wonder people have a tough time trusting politicians. That's the financial cost, and that's certainly important. But the human cost of Medicaid expansion has been overlooked for far too long. More than 3 decades ago, Congress created a special waiver for states that allows them to care for people with serious injuries and severe disabilities. These programs provide services for people with all sorts of problems, such as spinal injuries, traumatic brain injuries, severe mental disabilities, and more. The waiver allows seriously ill or disabled people to get much-needed care in their homes at a fraction of the cost of being placed in an institution. Otherwise, they're forced to either forgo care or face institutionalization, which I'm sure the nursing homes would really like, by the way. I know firsthand some of the struggles these people and their families face. First, because I served in Arkansas on the Governor's Commission for People with Disabilities, and second, because I'm permanently disabled after an accident in my early 20s. After my accident, special waivers helped me overcome my disability and get back to work as a business owner and eventually a legislator with the honor of representing the people of my district in the Arkansas House. Services I received for people with disabilities helped me avoid a lifetime of dependency. Instead, I have experienced the dignity of good, honest work, State Representative Josh Miller writes. But because of limited funding, there is a long list of people waiting to get additional services like the ones I received. Nationwide, there are more than 650,000 of these folks, including more than 3,000 living in my home state of Arkansas. To put that in perspective, there are more folks waiting for Medicaid services in this country than there are people living in the states of Wyoming or Vermont. I wish the bad news stopped there, but it doesn't. A recent report from the Foundation of Government Accountability found that since Medicaid expansion began, at least 21,904 people have died on waiting lists in Obamacare expansion states nationwide. Truly needy individuals have died waiting for help, while able-bodied adults are added to the welfare rolls by the hundreds of thousands. This is just plain wrong. Let me stop there. Why don't the socialists care about that? And I say that because Obamacare is a socialist program from a socialist president, Obama. Why don't they care? You say what, Joe? Their victims are still intact. That's a good point. That's not what I think the answer is, but you say that because they're victims that they can be exploited.
Look, think of it this way. There's able-bodied working-age adults getting on the Medicaid expansion rolls, while there are people who truly need it that are not getting on it. Like it said, there are people dying while waiting for their chance to be on the rolls. Well, that's a victim class that they've created now of people who can't get on the rolls even though they need it. Like a needy group of people who actually genuinely need this help.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. What I think, though, is why don't the socialists care is because they are more concerned with the implementation of socialism in our health care than they are with the actual people that need health care. So it's never been about health care. It's always been about control. And that's what socialism is. is control. It's at the heart. It's like it's supposed to be on a chalkboard. We're going to put all of our resources into one big pile, and we're going to divide it up equally. It's like, no, that's not what ends up happening. You end up happening people at the very, very top, and most people end up like the people who actually truly need what the government's supposed to be providing. Why don't the socialists? My point is, when Obamacare went into effect, why wasn't the first thing that they did take care of these 800,000 people nationwide? If it was really about helping people and it wasn't about destroying the current system, why wasn't the first thing the socialists did was take care of this population? No, instead, they expanded it to able-to-work people so they'd be dependent on the government for their health care. And that has a lot more consequences, a lot more questions. It may be much more insidious. It may be people that actually don't have the interest of people's health care. They have the interest of creating a big government state that controls the people like sheep. Josh Miller's piece on FoxNews.com goes on. We're interviewing him, by the way, at 7:33. Vulnerable citizens should not be placed at the back of the line behind able-bodied working-age adults. But that is exactly what's happened. Again, why don't the socialists care about that? According to state estimates, in Arkansas, we could pay down our entire Medicaid waiting list for about $45 million. Instead, we'll spend roughly $135 million in state funds on just Obamacare expansion in the next fiscal year. No need to check your vision. You read that correctly. For only a third of the cost of Obamacare expansion, every truly needy Arkansan waiting on a waiver could be given the help they desperately need. This is a picture of just how insanely out of whack our priorities have become. Fortunately, it's not too late to do the right thing. State Representative Josh Miller writes, I've worked tirelessly for intelligent solutions for our Medicaid problems to ensure our truly needy get cared for first. In fact, thanks to the support of my colleagues, the Arkansas House became the first legislative body in the nation to pass a bill that would have frozen enrollment in our Obamacare expansion. Folks that were on the program would have been given time to find other coverage options, but as they did, resources would have been freed up for truly vulnerable Arkansans. While we fell just short in the Senate committee, I intend to bring this common sense reform back before the legislature in our next session because it's the right thing to do. The Medicaid system is on life support while the truly vulnerable continue to wait and even die without services. Able-bodied adults are enrolled by the millions. I hope legislators across the country will join me in fighting Obamacare and putting the truly needy first. State Representative Josh Miller, folks. He represents the people of District 66. He'll be on at 7:33, and he got that op-ed published over at foxnews.com. Back in just a moment.
With public corruption and scandals in the news daily, Arkansans need someone with honesty and integrity in the state Senate. Mark Johnson is that man. Mark Johnson isn't a politician. He's a fifth-generation Arkansan and a successful small business owner. Mark Johnson will make ethics a priority and demand swift punishment for those who violate the public trust. Mark Johnson is pro-life and supports the Second Amendment. In the Republican primary, vote Mark Johnson for the state Senate. Paid for by Mark Johnson for Arkansas.
Arkansans need a true judicial conservative on the Supreme Court. David Sterling is that man. Sterling believes in the separation of powers in our government, and he will interpret the Constitution based on the original intent of the Founding Fathers. A member of the NRA and the Christian Legal Society, Sterling will serve Arkansans with honor and integrity as our next Supreme Court Justice. On May 22nd, vote David Sterling.
Paid for by Friends of David Sterling.
It's been said that freedom is in the DNA of every American, and I would say every Arkansan. Our nation and state are now in danger of letting our God-given freedom slip away by allowing government to be the arbiter of freedom. I agree with President Ronald Reagan, who said, and I quote, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem," end quote. Government is too large, too overreaching, and too corrupt. President Reagan also said, and I quote, "The most terrifying words in the English language are I'm from the government, and I'm here to help, end quote. This race is about voting for the candidate who best represents your interest, your family, and your future. For the last 2 terms in office, I've kept my promises to you, and I ask for your help to continue to represent our joint values of faith, family, and a protected future. I'm State Representative Dan Sullivan, and the choice is clear. I ask for your vote to continue our stand for freedom. Early voting is underway, and the election is May 22nd.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with State Representative Charlotte Douglas. So definitely want to stay tuned for that. It's going to be it's always great to talk to Charlotte Douglas. You know, one of the things Charlotte Douglas said several years ago, and this is how I knew she was, she understood. When the top of the show was talking about how a lot of people don't understand the environment that they go down into. Charlotte Douglas understands that, because she was at a Tea Party meeting, like a convention down in Little Rock, and that question got asked, and she said, well, you got to know your price before you go down there. You got to know your price. And she basically said you got to know that they know. You got to know that they're going to try to figure out what your price is. And they're going to try to pressure you here. They're going to try to pressure you there. They're going to try to go after your family here. They're going to try to go after your family there. And you just got to understand that. And you got to be you got to be willing to stand up to that. And I thought, wow, she gets it. She gets it. And so we'll be talking with State Representative Charlotte Douglas tomorrow at 7:33. And let's see here. Did anybody check out that Mike Masterson article? We referenced it yesterday, but I'm telling you, they've got a lot of press up there focusing on that Bob Ballinger, Brian King race, that Senate race, where Senator King is, he's running for re-election, and State Representative Bob Ballinger's trying to make the leap to the higher chamber there. I know House members would dispute that it's the higher chamber, but come on, guys, it's the higher chamber. Just admit it, cope with it, and move on. But it's quite fascinating. And I wonder if the Southwest Times Record is ever going to follow up on the State Representative Bob Ballinger saying that there was no GIF money in 2013 going for that land deal with Ecclesia College, and we proved yesterday that's not a true statement. There was GIF money at that time. We've got to go. One more hour coming your way next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Up. And that's what's so interesting about it is they do this phony attack saying you owe back taxes. You debunk it with documents, verifiable proof from the government. Say our bad, we made a mistake.
I don't know any taxes, right?
Yeah, you owe no taxes.
Right.
Let's be very clear. You owe no taxes. Tell us about the mix-up.
Well, the mix-up was that I worked in Texarkana, Arkansas at the time and lived in Texarkana, Arkansas. And as people may or may not know, Texarkana, Arkansas residents are exempt from the state income tax, and that's because we live in a border city that is bordered by Texarkana, Texas, where there is no state income tax. And in order for Texarkana, Arkansas to be competitive, the state years ago of Arkansas gave us that exemption. So if you live and work in Texarkana, Arkansas, you do not have to pay state income tax. Well, that's where I lived and worked for years and years. And then when I moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and that year that I moved to Hot Springs and I filed my taxes, the state came back because they had my new Hot Springs address, and they said, oh, wait, you live in Hot Springs. You should have been paying state income taxes. You owe taxes for all these years. And then I had to go back and prove to them with my residential records and my employment records and a note from my employee, and I cleared it all up. It took about 30 days for me to get all the paperwork in order, but once it was cleared, the state said, oh, okay, we see what's happened here. I guess their computer system messed up and just kicked that out. And it was fixed. I didn't have to pay them all that $7,000 because I didn't owe it. I never owed it. It was a mistake on their part. So that was clear, and it was over with. But all ASA people wanted to do is find that initial document from the state that said, oh, you owe all these years in taxes, and they produced that. But yet they also, out of that same file, didn't bother to produce the next piece of paper, which is that I'm free and clear. So that, but that's always the way Asa. That's the way his whole campaign has gone. That's the way he legislates. That's the way he governs. He governs that way. It's shell games and games rather than just being honest with the people.
Yeah.
And once we proved it, people said, "Okay, this is over with." Except that it's never over with this person because that's all they can hold on to, and they want to try to just keep on. But that's hurting them once again more than it's helping them.
No, it is, because it was, and it shows you that they are, they're getting their water boys. Again, this was all put out there by the spouse of an Asa Hutchinson employee that makes $83,000 a year in the governor's office.
Right.
And so you kind of think, if Asa loses this, my household's going to lose $83,000. I mean, and it's verifiable. You can look all that up. We talked about it. And so you just get, anybody whose wallet's going to get lighter from Asa Hutchinson losing, well, it's obvious how they're going to vote. But there's a lot more votes than there are government employees.
Yes, there are. But actually, if you look at the people right now, if you look at the little list of the people who are yelling the loudest about my presence in this race, Paul, if you want to know who benefits the most off of this gravy train of corruption that we have in Little Rock, look at the people who have nothing to do with this race and yet are yelling the loudest about Jan Morgan.
Yeah.
Those are the people you need to look at and say, okay, what is the motive there? And it's always going to be about money. There's always a money trail. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know what? Speaking of money, this whole issue with my getting that tax exemption while I was living in Texarkana, Arkansas, brings up the fact that I am the only candidate in this race who's truly talking about how we need to make that possible for all people in Arkansas. We need to get to the point where we don't have a state income tax for all people, not just Texarkana, Arkansas residents. I'm the only candidate who's out there saying this is the direction we need to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the fact that Texarkana has to have that special exemption is a rebuke and on everybody else, on the whole system. It's saying that we're overtaxed and we're overregulated and we need more money. And that's what you've been saying. We got to have more money back into the hands of the people.
Absolutely, or we can't continue to compete. And it's hurting us. We're surrounded by states that don't have a state income tax. And the people on the streets, I'm listening to them and talking to them, the tax burden is outrageous. And the fact that our governor, his tax reform commission, my opponent's tax reform commission is looking at more ways to get more tax money out of the people is egregious. That should cost him this election in itself. His stance on constitutional carry and the fact that he will not clarify for the people that we have constitutional carry in this state, that stance.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. Did anybody see what happened yesterday in Jerusalem? Did you see the media coverage of it? That was amazing. Joe, did you see what happened? Opening the United States Embassy? Oh, man, it was great. I watched it after the show yesterday. I watched the speeches. Benjamin Netanyahu, Jared Kushner was there. It was really powerful. And I got to thinking, this was on the 70th anniversary of the celebration of Nakba Day. So, according to Wikipedia, during the 1948 Palestinian War, you had, basically you have Israel being declared a nation again in 1948. And, boy, it's funny, Wikipedia just doesn't really want to talk much about this, do they? Not in the context that I know. And so you have essentially what became and becomes Israel's version of their independence, and Independence Day. On the 70th anniversary of Nakba Day, let's see here. The media here is interesting with their headlines. On the 70th anniversary of the establishment of Israel, its people would do well to reflect on the peaceful spirit of, this is from The Independent. And, as somebody who studies the Scripture, the Bible, because I am a Bible-believing Christian and I have a biblical worldview, the number 70, I was like, huh. I mean, I didn't see this coming until that, I saw the headline. I knew they were opening the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. And it's a big recognition when you have, the world's largest superpower that's establishing not only the current day reality of the situation when it comes to Jerusalem being Israel's capital. And if you're going to move forward with any sort of peace process, let's start by acknowledging what the reality is and just quit trying to ignore it. But then you also have the concept of Israel being the eternal capital. And if you really want to know what the Bible, if you look at the land situation, the geography situation, the Bible, in terms of talking about different cities, is a tale of two cities: the city of God, Jerusalem, and the city of man, Babylon. And if you, when you realize that fact, well, it's just, I think it's a very powerful piece of knowledge. Let me just say that. But if you think about 70, it was 70 years. The Babylonian exile was 70 years in Babylon before you had the decree by Artaxerxes to start to rebuild the wall, and then you know that sort of thing, and that can be found in the book of Nehemiah. That's a fun study. And then you have 70 weeks in a prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, 70 weeks that's specifically about your people, your holy city, to finish the transgressions, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting. And it's basically a prophecy about Israel and Jerusalem and the people from that point till the end of time in this 70-week prophecy. It's fascinating if you really want to dive into it. That's why, look, I'm not saying that there's definite meaning that it happened on the 70th. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's quite the when I heard it was the 70th anniversary. I know what the Bible says about the number 70. I know what it is. And the fact of the matter is, if you go read Daniel chapter 9, which may be confusing, but there's a lot of resources out there to help you through it. The whole point of Daniel chapter 9, there's a prayer of repentance in Daniel chapter 9 that is absolutely, it's just, it gets you right to your soul of this prayer of repentance. And there's also a really cool model here, because if you read Daniel chapter 9, you will find out that Daniel was actually, he got to this point because he himself was reading his Bible, or they wouldn't have called it that back then, but he was actually reading in Jeremiah. He was reading in Jeremiah 25, and he realized that the 70-year exile to Babylon was almost up, because Jeremiah prophesied that, hey, this land shall become a ruin and waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. And Jeremiah's like, oh, wow. Or I'm sorry, Daniel's like, oh, wow. Jeremiah says that it's almost up. And so that's what led to this whole thing. You should check it out. Because it's really, really cool. And Jerusalem, again, the city of God. That's the only thing. I wish that that's the one thing that would have been said during those commemorative ceremonies the other day. But I did listen to the John Hagee prayer, and boy, that was pretty powerful as well. You can give us a phone call or a text message, 870-275-9799. It's 870-275-9799. Also over at facebook.com/Conduit News. That's facebook.com/Conduit News. And hey, on the embassy thing, do you remember when Trump announced it last year? He announced that they're going to be moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And when he did, you know what the media said? You know, some of them said, yeah, you know, promises made, promises kept, but, you know, it's going to take them years. It's going to take years to have this done. And it happened pretty much instantly. Pretty much less than a year, right? It's approaching a year. And then they did it. And then they did it. They did it on the anniversary, May 15th, of Israel after the terrible, after what happened with World War II and everything else. And then you have that decree saying they're going to call this land Israel. It's just pretty much amazing. All right, transitioning. So we know a couple of things. By the way, only 7 days to act. 7 days until the May 22nd Republican primaries, Republican and Democratic primaries, and your Supreme Court judicial races, their elections. We have 7 days to act. Now, this race has taught us a lot about what Governor Asa Hutchinson is willing to do to stay in power. You know, that's the only thing that these politicians respect. That's the only thing that they fear. They have a great respect and fear for losing authority and positions and losing an election. And they will, they will stay silent when they're in office. Many times when, the people want something, the people don't want something, or they won't listen to the people. But when it comes to re-election time, we know that Governor Asa Hutchinson for sure wants to paint himself as somebody on the far right. And that's what he's attempted to do. We know this because the governor, because of Jan Morgan getting in the race, the governor came out and started talking about how he's going to reduce the size of government by shrinking our state agencies. What was Jan Morgan talking about? Jan Morgan was talking about how many boards and commissions and state agencies we have on the campaign trail. So Asa then takes her position, holds a press conference, and says, if I'm reelected, I promise that I'm going to do these things. And you know what? There's also an interesting thing. When Asa came out and made his state agencies announcement, he started giving a history, and he started telling the audience how long it's been in Arkansas since we've had a reform. And I'm thinking, where has Asa heard that before? And he's heard it from me. I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for a long time, and I've been saying that the reform, the people have been voting for Republicans because they've been voting for reform. And I've been saying we've got these state agencies that are operating under the same guidelines that they have, since the Democrats have been in control for so long, that we're operating among a system that almost put two Clintons, that began the political career that almost put two Clintons in the White House. And we haven't reformed this system, and we desperately need this reform. And I was trying to give you a history. I was trying to give you a context. How does Asa start his press conference? He starts trying to give you a history, and he starts trying to give you a context. You see, he's attempting to take other people's positions and paint himself with it. It's a veneer. It's a mirage. It's not real. Then we have the grocery tax increase. And he comes out and he starts talking about how, it's only it's only legislative debate. I don't have anything to do with that task force, which it was his idea completely. I don't have anything to do with it. And why are you afraid of legislative debate? Other people are they're just debating the idea. Then, of course, Conduit for Action puts out the fact that in 2006, several times he said, I want to eliminate the grocery tax. Of course, he's had almost 4 years, and he hasn't eliminated the grocery tax. We still have the grocery tax, and they're talking about a grocery tax increase. So governor is finally pressured enough because Jan Morgan is in the race. He has to paint himself as a right-wing guy, and he comes out and he says, I don't support the grocery tax increase. And that kind of torpedoes the idea of what the task force is doing and how they're going to try to get more money from us so that they can try to at least, attempt this shell game. And so now the task force doesn't know what to do. And I was listening to Kenneth Wallace. He had a live stream of the task force maybe last week or sometime, and one of the things he said was, he was like, nobody knows what's going on here. He was in the committee room, and he's like, nobody knows what's going on here because Asa came out against the grocery tax, and now nobody knows what to do here because this was the predetermined outcome. They were going to study it, and by study it, what it really means is figure out talking points to sell to the people as to how raising your grocery tax is a good thing and it's going to help you. So they don't know what to do. So I've been waiting. Well, how are they going to get the money? They have to have money to continue to pay Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's what this is all about. They want more money going to the government so that they can pay Blue Cross Blue Shield more money. Because those are their big buddies. So the governor's nephew tweeted this. Senator Jim Hendren, nephew number one, tweeted this the other day. And I think I have an answer here. And this is just a prediction. I could be wrong. But he tweets, quote, Tax Reform and Relief Task Force starts review of property taxes next week. Should be interesting. That's right. Property taxes. Arkansas doesn't have a statewide property tax. Why do I see the grocery tax is torpedoed? Let's study a statewide property tax. And then when you get the backlash on that, they'll come back and say, well, the only thing we can do is raise your sales taxes. We're just going to have to raise your sales tax. They want to raise your taxes somewhere so that they can claim they cut them somewhere else. So what is the article he links to here? Well, it's from the Tax Foundation. Go over to the Tax Foundation. Pull up this website here, Joe. And, of course, it's a map of the state of Arkansas. It's a map of the United States, and you can see the state of Arkansas right there, and you can compare where Arkansas is on the map. We are number 48th right now in property taxes. Tax Foundation writing, property taxes are the largest source of combined state and local collections, followed by general sales taxes, individual income taxes, and corporate income taxes. How does your state rank? Well, we rank 48th. We got a lot of room to move up that list if we just raise our property taxes or create a statewide property tax. Let's create a statewide property tax, and we promise we'll reduce your income taxes. Yeah, New Jersey does have the highest property taxes in the nation. Anyway, I just telling you right now, here's the warning. This is the warning. Here it is. You got to figure out where they're going. And now that the grocery tax is torpedoed because of Jan Morgan stopped the grocery tax for now. I mean, Asa, if he were to win, he could come back and say, I support it now, or, well, I'm not for it, but this is what the legislature has decided, and I don't have anything to do with the task force that I suggested and created, and I gave a speech to do, and then the next day the bill was filed because it was already written by my office. But I have nothing to do with the task force. Truth to these people is just a group of words that get them from one crisis to the next. And right now the crisis is 7 days. Early voting's going on right now. We've got 7 days till the election, the primary election on May 22nd. Go and vote if you haven't, and take 10 people with you. You got to go to break. Back in just a moment.
Hello, this is Frank Glidewell, and I'm asking for your vote for State Senate. I've lived in Sebastian County all my life. I've had the privilege of serving as Justice of the Peace, County Judge, and State Representative. I've always done so with honesty and integrity. I've owned a small business for 30 years. We've got a major problem in Arkansas with the corrupt politicians. I have no special interest supporting my campaign. I am the only Republican candidate in my race who has not voted for Obamacare. That is taking hundreds of millions of dollars a year away from our schools, roads, and law enforcement.
Paid for by Frank Glidewell.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
Money, power, prestige, essence, 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 ace, ace, ace.
Available now from Aristocrats Serving Arkansas. From the Nata Rhino Collection. The fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so one of my sisters lives in Central Arkansas, and on their way to school, she and my niece's nephew they listen to the program. They listen to Conduit News, and I saw them this weekend over Mother's Day, and they kept asking me. They kept saying, Uncle Paul, will you do the Essence of Bureaucrat? Do the voice, do the Essence of Bureaucrat. And I had to tell them, I had to break it to them, they have a long-lost cousin named Pablo Harrell. And so I'm not, that's not me. That's Pablo Harrell. He's a weird guy. Pablo Harrell, when he cut that parody there, he was attempting to, he was just attempting to sound as, I don't know, just as sexy as he could. He's a weird guy, Pablo. He's a weird guy, but just wanted you guys to know that when you get requested to do that. I mean, he's, he actually doesn't. He lives in Mexico. He does the work remotely. Pablo does, but yeah, just so you know, that's Pablo Harrell is the voice behind that genius parody there. Advertising for a gender neutral perfume, or is it would it be a cologne? What would it be? If it's gender neutral, you couldn't call it a perfume. You couldn't call it a cologne, right? Oh my goodness. Okay, somebody says don't forget about the cronyism. Yeah, that's true. That's exactly right. There's a lot of that. I'm loving your Facebook comments. You guys can check it out. Go over to facebook.com/Conduit News and check it out there. Hey, coming up in just a minute, we're going to be talking with State Representative Josh Miller. He had an op-ed published over at foxnews.com, and so I want to talk to him about that. I want to talk to him about the state of things at the Marble Palace. There may be no one with more knowledge about just how interesting things are at the Marble Palace, just what kind of environment that you go into. I mean, he's the one guy that is, well, let me just put it to you this way, and this is actually really good, I think, for the people. There are so many attempts to grow government down there. It's been said that Josh Miller could just take a piece of duct tape and he could put his, just tape it over his no button, and just so it always hold down the no button on the voting machine on the House floor. And because everything they're trying to do, everything that they try to do for the most part, not literally everything, but you understand. Tire tax, internet tax, gas tax, you name it. The military tax that ended up being a sham to raise your taxes, on candy and soda and digital downloads. And they used the military as pawns, pain point politics. A lot of military veterans were upset about that after they realized what was happening and how, the government wouldn't just absorb a $13 million cut. Cuts are the operative word there. You're not going to cut spending. And you haven't cut spending. You refuse to cut spending. That's why you increase spending $133 million, then $142 million, then $160, and now $172 million in your fourth year's proposed budget. Back in just a moment.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Should cost him this election. We could just go on and on.
Well,
There's so many issues, and the only reason he may not be in trouble is because of uneducated, low-information voters.
Yeah, that's true. Hopefully, they're getting your message. Hopefully, they're getting Conduit News. Using this platform to say, "Hey, these are the issues that the people are concerned about." Let's talk about constitutional carry for a second, okay?
Okay. All right.
Because this is a really good. I want to use this as an example of people who get new information. And then they're able to change their minds based on what the facts are. And so with constitutional carry, there was a time where you subscribed to the concept that you had to have a permit to carry concealed.
To carry a gun in Arkansas, right? To carry concealed. And the reason I thought that, Paul, is because I was in the process of becoming an Arkansas State Police concealed handgun license instructor. I was taking the classes, and at that time, I was new to Hot Springs, and that's what we were being taught. Arkansas State Police were teaching instructors, you have to have a license to conceal carry. And according to Justin McDaniel, who was the Attorney General back then, that was his position, okay? So I was simply saying, look, this is what, and that's what I said. That's what I said on the internet. That's what I said on social media. According to our Attorney General and according to Arkansas State Police, you have to have a license to conceal carry. That was a fact that I was being taught by state police. So, that's what I was simply telling the people based on what, we were, who would have thought that state police would be misleading instructors in this state? And who would have thought that your Attorney General at that time would misrepresent the truth to the people? So I was simply saying what we were being told.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I got an education thanks to that Patriots Act 746. They said, "Hey, Dan, have you read the Arkansas Constitution, Article 2 of the Arkansas Constitution?" And back then, no, I had not sat down and read the Arkansas Constitution. I was, inundated with paperwork and learning what I had to learn to teach those classes. So I did, and once I learned, I said, "Oh, so you mean state police are misleading the people? They're misleading instructors in this state, concealed handgun license instructors. So
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Crafted talk puts the people into shock. Once the light of truth exposes all the lies. With the nephews in control and the criminals on parole, the only thing the people can do is vote. Asa doesn't care about our Constitution. His conservatism is an illusion. Line item vetoes and higher taxes. We all voted for him once, but he won't make spending cuts. Let's all vote and say, hey, Asa, we won't get fooled again.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Yes. 7 days to act. 7 whole days to act. Early voting is going on now, and we've only got 7 more days until the election, primary election, which is Tuesday, May the 22nd. It's a big deal. So we are having some problems getting connected with State Representative Josh Miller. So as soon as we can get those issues fixed, he's going to be on with us. So stay tuned for that. He had a great piece. Regardless, we already covered his piece over over at FoxNews.com, and he just really did a great job bringing up some issues about what the purpose of welfare programs really is, or what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be for those who truly cannot help themselves versus those who are able to and are just choosing not to and everything else. It's really, really powerful. And there's obviously it's about what we've done here in Arkansas. Over at Arkansas Online, you can go to arkansasonline.com. You had Mike Masterson. He wrote this over the weekend, and I was supposed to get to it yesterday, but I failed to get to it. So he talks about these pesky contradictions with really just with Bob Ballinger and some of the debates that he's done. Mike Masterson writes, contradictions can cause my skeptical little brain to convulse. I hear an elected politico pronounce one thing as fact nowadays when plain folks claim the opposite. And I believe the folks. Such a study in contradiction has been making headlines of late over in Carroll and Madison counties, where GOP State Rep Bob Ballinger, a Berryville attorney, has been stating since April that failed SB 373 of 2017, which would have diluted the state's Freedom of Information Act, never had any organized resistance. Some believe, had that amendment become law, it would have gutted our law by, among other provisions, exempting communications between colleges or universities, other governmental entities, and their lawyers. No resistance to neutering our state's Freedom of Information Act. Get serious, Bob, Mike Masterson writes. Members of the Arkansas Press Association always vigorously oppose legislative attempts to dilute one of the strongest FOI laws in the country. That includes Ellen Kreth, publisher of Huntsville's Madison County Record, who publicly told Ballinger the press had been opposed to the bill. Both weekly newspapers in Eureka Springs have covered the controversy since his comments during an April 19th meeting in Huntsville. Scott Loftus, managing editor of the Carroll County News, openly opposes Ballinger, who is running against incumbent Senator Brian King of Green Forest in the primary. He understandably doesn't trust Ballinger, a very large man, any farther than he can toss him, even with my help. Now, hang on. Whatever. In a recent piece, Loftus detailed an exchange between Ballinger and Kreth in the April meeting. Kreth, quote, the Press Association never did support Bill 373. Ballinger, they didn't oppose it. Kreth, we always opposed it. We always did. A couple of weeks later, in a debate with King, Ballinger was asked about that exchange. Loftus quoted Ballinger's response. It's funny that the press, which is liberal, is being involved with my opponent's side and helping him with this. The reason why I said the Press Association didn't oppose the bill is there was no opposition to the bill. To my committee, the State Agencies Committee, there was no opposition, no organized opposition. The Press Association didn't do anything. I don't know if they supported it. There was no organized opposition. It comes to my committee, and it's a crappy bill. It needs to be amended. I didn't sponsor the bill. End quote. Mike Masterson goes on. Then surfaced a revelatory video recording of a meeting from March 1st, 2017 of the House State Agencies and Governmental Affairs Committee chaired by Ballinger, in which he asks GO State Representative Andy Davis, the House sponsor, for his opinions. Loftus reported, brief explanation, it's a short bill. The problem we have is the FOI is being used to circumvent a discovery process, attorney-client privilege, when the client is a public entity. This bill would protect that attorney-client communication under FOI. Ballinger, after asking for questions, we do have, quote, we do have the Press Association who is signed up to speak against. Does anybody else want to present anything on that, end quote. Ballinger afterwards added, we have 3 people signed up to speak against. And who is seated behind Davis in the video? Why, it's Tom Larimer of Green Forest, who was the executive director of the Arkansas Press Association until this January. So you have a video that it reveals the complete opposite of what Bob Ballinger is saying in public. But how can that be when Ballinger said, Mike Masterson goes on, there was no opposition and the Press Association didn't do anything? On March 12, 2017, this newspaper published a story revealing the University of Arkansas and Arkansas State University systems were aiding Ballinger with proposed language for the Freedom of Information Act amendment he was preparing. It was, legal experts agreed, an unnecessary amendment which would hamper citizens' access by concealing records that should remain public. The story also said Ballinger had taken Davis's place promoting the amendment in the House after Davis began hearing from critics about this proposed bill, Masterson writes. The Democrat, I also think maybe, I'm just going to say this is from my memory, I think Representative Davis had a death in the family or something. I think I remember that. That may be why he, dropped carrying the bill. Mike Masterson goes on, the Democrat Gazette story also carried public criticisms of SB 373 from Larimer, Little Rock attorney John Toll, and UALR law professor Robert Steinbuck. Yet Ballinger, with a straight face, a year later publicly claims there was no organized opposition. Masterson goes on, my other trust problem here involves Ballinger working for Ecclesia College in Springdale as its attorney while directing the state's now defunct general improvement funds to that tiny private college as a legislator. Yes, you read that obvious conflict correctly. As Loftus described in his related concerns, among the work that Ballinger has done for Ecclesia is title work on a parcel of land in Springdale that the college purchased in 2013. The 23.2-acre tract had an appraised value of $204,000 in 2016, 3 years after Ecclesia paid $675,000 for it. Perhaps there's a reasonable explanation for why the college paid so much for the land, but we haven't heard it. Ecclesia isn't talking, and neither is Ballinger. Anyone share a buffered headache powder? Mike Masterson, again, a journalist with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Now, here's the thing. We really need those documents from Ecclesia College, and we're not going to see them. Ecclesia is not going to tell you where this money went, but we have the documents thanks to the John Woods case and thanks to what we do have from the General Improvement Fund and FOIA to be able to see that, yes, general improvement money did go at Ballinger's request through the Economic Development, Planning District to Ecclesia for purchase of this land, and then he did the title work on the land at a discount, he has said, and Bob has been on the show and he's talked about all of this. And at this point, honestly, you see the contradictions that are in the press, whether he said there is no general improvement fund money at this time, or there was no general improvement fund money back in 2013 when there clearly was general improvement fund money in 2013. The documents prove it conclusively. Or whether, we now have him saying that SB 373 had no organized opposition when it clearly does have organized opposition, or did have organized opposition, and he even admitted so on video. And so it's a huge contradiction. And it just, to me, seems that, when you're starting to get hung up like this, it's not a good sign, and it makes people have trust problems. It really does. Now, yesterday we reported that a church in Eureka Springs, there was a voter election guide comparing Ballinger and comparing Brian King, and it was an election guide that was saying that Ballinger's pro-life and King is not pro-life. And I should have added this. Both of these candidates, Bob Ballinger and Brian King, have the endorsement of Arkansas Right to Life. And yet they put somebody put an election guide, in church worship guides in Eureka Springs. And, it was not an official act of the Ballinger campaign. From what I can tell, and I think that's pretty, it's another group that's doing this. But I just got to wonder, I just can't imagine a scenario where that's acceptable to put, political flyers inside a church bulletin for the Sunday morning service. I just think that's a little much, don't you? Don't you think that's a little much? It seems odd. It's about as odd as, and we know this because of the public corruption trial of John Woods, it's about as odd as Ecclesia, it being revealed to being okay with a scheme that didn't come to fruition, but there was a scheme where John Woods was going to run a bill to legalize medical marijuana and set up a fund. The tax dollars from marijuana were going to go to a fund that would have been funneled directly and exclusively to Ecclesia College. And Orrin Paris, the now, the guilty, he pled guilty to this whole scheme of the kickbacks and everything with GIF money. He said, well, we'll use the money that's going to work for the kingdom of Satan, and we'll use the money for the kingdom of good. And it's just like, wow, well, the ends really justify the means here. You think that it's a good idea to use government to legalize marijuana, and then to take the tax money and funnel it to your Christian college. To me, I just feel like it's kind of the same. The ends justify the means here. We're trying to get money for a Christian college, and we're going to use it for what we need to use it for. We're going to use this politician, John Woods, and he's going to take care of us, and he's going to rig the laws to where we have a dedicated funding source now. From people who smoke marijuana, we're going to benefit from it. It's like whoever thought that was a good idea also thought it was a good idea, potentially maybe, to put an election guide in a church bulletin. A little slipping it in, slipped all these voter guides in the bulletins. Anyway, let me know what you think. We got a pretty big ad block here, but we're going to be back here in just a minute. It's Conduit News Radio. Don't go anywhere.
It's been said that freedom is in the DNA of every American, and I would say every Arkansan. Our nation and state are now in danger of letting our God-given freedom slip away by allowing government to be the arbiter of freedom. I agree with President Ronald Reagan, who said, and I quote, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem," end quote. Government is too large, too overreaching, and too corrupt. President Reagan also said, and I quote, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help, end quote. This race is about voting for the candidate who best represents your interest, your family, and your future. For the last 2 terms in office, I've kept my promises to you, and I ask for your help to continue to represent our joint values of faith, family, and a protected future. I'm State Representative Dan Sullivan, and the choice is clear. I ask for your vote to continue our stand for freedom. Early voting is underway, and the election is May 22nd.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas.
Arkansans need a true judicial conservative on the Supreme Court. David Sterling is that man. Sterling believes in the separation of powers in our government, and he will interpret the Constitution based on the original intent of the Founding Fathers. A member of the NRA and the Christian Legal Society, Sterling will serve Arkansans with honor and integrity as our next Supreme Court Justice. On May 22nd, vote David Sterling.
Paid for by Friends of David Sterling.
With public corruption and scandals in the news daily, Arkansans need someone with honesty and integrity in the state Senate. Mark Johnson is that man. Mark Johnson isn't a politician. He's a 5th-generation Arkansan and a successful small business owner. Mark Johnson will make ethics a priority and demand swift punishment for those who violate the public trust. Mark Johnson is pro-life and supports the Second Amendment. In the Republican primary, vote Mark Johnson for the state Senate. Paid for by Mark Johnson for Arkansas.
Conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So, the United States Supreme Court there's this movement to get casinos here in Arkansas. The U.S. Supreme Court now ruling that states can decide about sports gambling. We talked about that last hour. The Lisa Hammersley posts this graphic over at the Gazette. Look at this. Gambling interests among big donors in governor's contest. Campaign contribution reports show these individuals and groups as among the biggest givers to candidates in the contested Republican and Democratic gubernatorial primaries May 22nd. The total contributions, ACE is $3.6 million. If you take the Democrats plus Jan Morgan, they have a combined campaign war chest of $369,580. Just look at this right now. $59,325 from Southland Park Gaming and Racing. That's the Jacobs family and executives. $59,000 to Asa Hutchinson. Then you have the Sela family or the Sella family and executives. That would be Oaklawn Gaming and Racing. So you have West Memphis and you have Hot Springs. That's $54,500. So we have over $100,000 from the casinos, essentially, from the gambling interests going to Governor Asa Hutchinson. Then you have the First National Bank of Paragould executives and family, $45,000. Nursing home owners, $43,000. Got to get Asa to cut those ads saying vote for tort reform, and don't you know he will? If Asa Hutchinson wins the primary, he's going to be cutting ads telling you to vote for the bad tort reform amendment, and he's going to say, he'll probably say, vote for the tort reform and get a rainbow every day in the sky. Then you have highway construction PACs giving him $26,000. In contrast, you can see, you can see the big money donations to Democrat Jared Henderson, Democrat Letitia Sanders, and then Jan Morgan. And it's clear we know who is the big money and where the big money is going. It's very, very clear. At this point, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's just amazing. Are you seeing the amount of Jan Morgan signs that are going up everywhere? It really is something. You have the status quo versus the people, and the people who are maintaining that status quo, they're a minority. They really are. They're a minority. And again, we've got 7 days. 7 days to go vote. Go and vote if you haven't voted. Early voting is going on right now. It's a lot of times it's more convenient. But I'll tell you this: during the early vote is because conservatives tend to go out on Election Day, and that's a good thing. But I'll tell you this right now: it's during the early vote when conservatives lose ground because there's just all of this time to to try to sway people to vote your way and to try to get them to the polls and all this other stuff. I saw an email. Somebody sent me an email, about, I think it was Colpeck dropping off donuts for teachers. These donuts, they sent out an email to all these teachers. Donuts in the teacher's lounge are courtesy of Colpeck. It's like, okay, well, they're obviously trying to get somebody to go vote for Colpeck. I remember a similar scheme. His name is Hudson Hallam, and he went to jail. He got convicted for giving away vodka and fried chicken for absentee ballots. Yeah, that's right. He gave away vodka and fried chicken. This is a real story. Go look this up. Hudson Hallam of West Memphis. And when he was caught, he basically was like, I didn't know I couldn't do that. I mean, when he got caught, he was like, I thought that this is how I learned it. Everybody's been giving away vodka and fried chicken for absentee ballots for years. Go look it up. Hudson Hallam, former state representative, giving away vodka and fried chicken for votes. We've got to go. Conduit News Radio will be back here tomorrow at 6 a.m. Arkansas, be safe.
The news